Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Moore. I'm the Director of Government Relations here at St. Mary's University. Thank you very much for joining us today for our webinar, Revitalizing SMEs through Business Intelligence and Big Data Analytics. The SOBI School of Business, Community Revitalization and Prosperity Network is a project that is exploring how we can come out of the current crisis stronger and more prosperous than before. It's mobilizing the expertise that exists within the SOBI School of Business and encourages the participation of industry groups, business owners, and community leaders. We believe that by bringing together academic and operational expertise, we can find the best solutions to the problems we face. Our speaker today, Dr. Wang, is a professor in the Department of Finance, Information Systems, and Management Science at the SOBI School of Business at St. Mary's University. He has published 5 textbooks and more than 100 research articles in the areas of management information systems, big data, business intelligence, and business analytics. His research has been and is currently funded by the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada. Before turning things over, I want to quickly discuss the format for today's webinar. First, you're all muted for this session with cameras turned off. Dr. Wang will walk us through the presentation, and immediately following, we will have a Q&A session. If you want to ask questions, you can send those questions using the chat function at any time during the presentation. Please select our tech controller, Bria Matheson's name in the chat box when sending your questions to have them sent privately. She will be moderating the questions as they come in. Please do not send chat messages to the group. And once we begin the Q&A session, we will answer as many questions as time permits today. We hope very much that you find this very interesting and informative, and look forward to hearing from you in the Q&A session. Without any further hesitation, I'll now turn it over to the good doctor.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Good afternoon, everyone. And it's my pleasure to share some thoughts on business intelligence and big data analytics with you. So this talk basically will be based on my recent publications on big data for small and medium-sized enterprises, and which is published in the Journal of Management in the spring. So let me start with a hypothetical game. Suppose that you are given a choice of 3 doors. Behind each door, there is an unknown amount of cash, and you are going to choose a particular door to win the cash behind it. So you can open a particular door and choose that particular door to win the cash behind the door. Now, our goal is to maximize the return. Basically, we want to win as much cash as possible. And there are a variety of strategies allow us to achieve the maximization of the return. One is random picking. So because there are 3 doors, we can randomly pick up one door and open that door and win the cash behind it. And in fact, we only have 1/3 of a chance of success to maximize the return. Another strategy is so-called deterministic picking, which means we always choose a particular door. Let's say we always choose the first door. And once again, there is only 1/3 of a chance of the success. And now, if we observe this hypothetical game, and we just found that humans cannot outperform the monkeys, because the monkey can perform random picking or deterministic picking, and in order to maximize the return. Now the question is that, can we do better? Or say, is there a more intelligent approach allow us to maximize the return? And when we think about this particular game, we say there's nothing we can do without introducing additional conditions. So let's say we are going to introduce additional conditions. Let's say we are going to collect the data. Now, if we can open all 3 doors to counter the cash behind them in advance, the game basically will be trivial because it's not interesting at all. We can always pick up the door with the most cash, and this allow us to basically maximize the return. So this is the trivial condition. We are not interested in this particular scenario. What happens if we just open one door to counter the cache behind it in advance. And we found that it's not very helpful because this problem is the same as the original problem. Open one door, basically we know the amount of cache, but we cannot do better, which means we cannot outperform the monkey. What we want is a more intelligent approach, which allow us to outperform the monkey, and that is what we want. So what is really interesting is that suppose that we can open any two doors to counter the cache behind them in advance. Now, here is an intelligent algorithm allow us to do better than the original scenario. The algorithm says that we randomly choose two doors, any two doors. Let's say door number 1 and door number 2. And then we are going to open the first door to counter the cache behind it. And then we are going to open the second door to counter the cache behind it. If the amount of the cache behind the first door is greater than the amount of cache behind the second door, then we are going to say we are going to choose the third door. If the amount of cache behind the first door is less than or equal to the cache behind the second door, we are going to stick with the second door. Let's say we are going to say this probably will be the door with the most cache. So in that case, door number 2 will be our final decision. I don't want to get the details why this intelligent algorithm works, but I can tell you that the chance of the success in terms of maximize the return increase from 1/3 to 1/2, which means the probability of winning the most cache will be 1/2 instead of 1/3, which means we are going to increase the chance of success. And also, on average, this algorithm is able to win more cache than the random picking or deterministic picking. And here is the amount of cache this algorithm will win. And trust me, okay, this basically this figure is the actual figure this algorithm will be able to win. Now, what I want you to remember about this game is that first, it's possible to utilize the data to maximize the return. So if we are going to collect the data, it's possible that we are going to increase the return. The second, the remark I want you to remember from this story is that more data does not guarantee more return. So let's get back to the, if we just open any one door to counter the cache behind it, okay? It's not very helpful. And that's why more data do not guarantee more return. But still, it's likely if we get more data, we expect more return, okay? And it's possible to get more return, but we cannot guarantee that. The third remark about this story is that we need the intelligence to utilize the data to maximize the return. We need to design intelligent algorithm that utilize the data in order to achieve the maximization of the return. And that is the philosophy of business intelligence. We are going to collect the data and we are going to find an intelligent way to utilize the data in order for the business to gain the competitive advantages over the competitors. And that is the motivation for the business intelligence. Now, before I get into business intelligence, I just want to introduce a few concepts. The first concept is about the data, information, and the knowledge. The data basically is a raw fact. They represent simple observations. Basically, they will be stored as a sequence of digits on computers. So one example is I give you a sequence of digits 902.496.8231, okay? And the data does not have any meaning because on the computer, they will be stored as a sequence of digits. The information basically will be the data and the semantic meaning of the data. So once we assign the semantic meaning to the data, it becomes information. And for example, if I tell you that that digits we just mentioned represent a telephone number, so we know that this digit is a telephone number. The knowledge basically is the information can be used to guide actions such as business decision making. And one example is, say, you can always call this particular phone number if you have any questions on business intelligence and big data, and we can discuss, and hopefully we can come up with a solution to your questions. So if you remember this phone number, which is my phone number, and you know that if you come up with any kind of questions on business intelligence and big data, you can call me. That is a knowledge. And data, information, and knowledge, they are all valuable assets for any organizations, including small and medium-sized enterprises. And in fact, knowledge is more important to small and medium-sized enterprises. Why? Because the knowledge embedded in the small and medium-sized enterprises allow these small and medium-sized enterprises to gain the competitive advantages over the large corporations. And that is the key for the survival of small and medium-sized enterprises. Now, a related concept is about big data. The concept of the big data started in the middle of 1990s. And at that time, basically, we are referring to a huge size of data, and that is the start of the big data. These days, we are talking about a variety of aspects of the big data, including the volume, which means we are going to have a huge size of the data. But in addition to the volume, we also talk about the variety of the data, which means the data can have many different formats. One example is customer's address. Now you can see that different customers will input their address in different ways, which means we are going to get a different data formats from the customers, and they all refer to the address. So that's why I say we are going to have variety of data, and we also talk about the velocity of the data, which means the data will be collected from multiple sources. They will be processed on some platforms, and how fast the data is being produced, is collected, and is processed refers to the velocity of the big data. We also have variety of the big data, which means the accuracy and the quality of the data may be different for the data. And we can also have variability of the data, which means both velocity and the variety of the data will change over the time. And we need a specialized computing software to deal with this kind of situation. Now, the most important aspects of big data is we want to create business value proposition out of the big data. And that is about the value of the big data. So these are 6 V's of the big data, which defines the big data from the small data or other type of data. And the main objective of business intelligence is to enable easy access to utilize the data for business decision models to provide business managers with the ability to transform the data into good business decisions and actionable business decisions. The term of business intelligence basically was invented by Gartner's group in the middle of 1990s, but the concept was much older. Basically, the concept started by the end of 1960s, the beginning of using the computers for business applications. And in the 1970s, we call them decision support systems. In the 80s, we call them enterprise information systems. In the 90s, we call them business intelligence. And these days, we call them big data analytics. Basically, that's the exact same type of technology which allow the business managers to apply the decision model to transform the data into good and actionable business decisions. And that is the definition of the business intelligence. Now, keep in mind, business intelligence is an umbrella term. It may refer to different things to different people, because this term, business intelligence, was invented by the IT industry. So that's why it is connected with a variety of different types of technologies. Now, if you are from the business community, don't be afraid of these different terms. It's just the jargon. It has nothing to do with you, because they refer to different computing technologies to support business intelligence. From business point of view, business intelligence just means that we are going to apply the decision model to utilize the data. So basically, we are going to collect the data, we are going to analyze the data, and then we are going to make business decisions based on the data. And that is about business intelligence. But other people, particularly in the technical world, basically they use the term refer to different technologies. So don't be afraid of that. And now for small and medium-sized enterprises, the life cycle of the business intelligence starts with the data collection, which means the acquisition of data. And once we collect the data or record the data, we are going to clean the data, we are going to extract the data, and basically integrate the data from multiple sources to summarize data. And the most important part will be analyze the data. And at the end, we need transform the data and the information into knowledge, which allow the business managers to make business decisions. And this is about interpretation of the data. So now you can see that at the top of this picture, you will see the big data processing. Now, of course, there are challenges associated with these big data processing tasks, such as heterogeneity of the data, and we may end up with a huge amount of data. This is about the scalability of the data. Another thing is about the timeliness of the data, because are we going to rely on the data 10 years ago to make business decisions? The answer will be no. Normally, if we want to make business decisions, we want to make decisions based on recent data rather than the ancient data. And privacy and the security always an issue for any kind of computerized systems, including the business intelligence and the big data systems. And we want to make sure that all the system will follow the laws and follow the ethical guidelines, so that all the privacy will be enforced and so on. And of course, the goal for business intelligence and big data analytics is about the business decision making, and this means human collaboration. Why? Because if we are going to make decisions, it's not a single person going to make decisions, and it's more likely we are going to get a group of people try to come up with a reasonably good business decisions. When we say good decisions, it means the decision will solve the current problem without introducing additional problems. That is the definition of the good decisions. We are not going to find the optimal decisions because optimal decisions may not be easily to be found. And that's why we are going to focus on the good business decisions, which means a decision will solve the problem without introducing any additional problems. And now at the bottom of this picture, you will see the challenges for small and medium-sized enterprises in terms of business intelligence and big data. And one is the strategic use of big data, because if the small and medium-sized enterprises, they want to adopt business intelligence, they must have the clear vision about the strategic use of the big data to allow them to gain the competitive advantages over the competitors. And of course, the big data and business intelligence is about IT. So which means the organization must have the IT literacy and the infrastructure, as well as the architecture to support this kind of initiatives. And if we want to analyze data, we need a big data tools to analyze the data. So I will talk about what can small and medium-sized enterprises do with respect to business intelligence and big data. And I'm going to focus on 4 different aspects. The first one will be the strategic use of big data. The second one will be the knowledge guide big data project planning. The third one will be feasible IT solutions suitable for small and medium-sized enterprises. And the last one will be the new knowledge products. So before a small or medium-sized enterprise want to adopt or start a new business intelligence or big data initiative, they must have a clear vision how they can utilize the big data to gain the competitive advantages over the competitors. The reason is that harvesting big data is an organizational venture. For the small and medium-sized enterprise, it means a huge investment for the organization. And we want to make sure that there will be return on the investment for the organization. So that's why the small and medium-sized enterprise must define the strategies for the business intelligence and big data. And these strategies must be aligned with the business strategy of the organization. Let's say the organization has its business strategy, let's say for the focus, which means the small and medium-sized enterprises, they will limit the scope of their business to a specific segment of the market. And if the organization try to adopt the business intelligence and big data, the strategy for use the big data must be aligned with its business strategy, current business strategy. And also the organization must address a full range of potential organizational challenges. The reason is that the strategy use of big data must be sustainable. If the organization try to invest a huge amount of investment on big data, they must expect a huge amount of return. Okay, otherwise the initiative or project will not be justifiable. Once the organization has a clear vision of the strategic use of big data, then we want to have the project planning, and I call it knowledge guided big data project planning. Basically, we want the small and medium-sized organization to figure out what data will be needed, what are data sources to collect the data, how we collect these data in a cheap or timely fashion, and which platform will be used to store the data, and which tool will be used to analyze the data. So we need to answer these questions for the project planning to adopt business intelligence and big data. And as I mentioned, the business intelligence and big data initiatives, basically, they are basically IT initiatives. So we need find the feasible IT solutions, particularly suitable for the small and medium-sized enterprises. Now, in my paper, I identified the several types of solutions which are specifically suitable for small and medium-sized enterprises, including end-user-oriented application software, such as a small-scale customer relationship management or enterprise resource planning systems. Or most small and medium-sized enterprises, they buy off-the-shelf software packages like Microsoft Office. So we want to utilize these commercialized software, which is already used by the small and medium-sized enterprises. And also, these days, a lot of companies are using the social media as a marketing tool. Why not we emphasize that for the small and medium-sized enterprises? Because a lot of customers will use the social media. This will allow the enterprise to reach the larger range, a broader range of the customers. Now, in order to reduce the IT operational cost, the small and medium-sized enterprises may use the open source software or use the open government data sets, okay, which means these data sets are available to the public for free. And these open source software and data sets allow the small and medium-sized enterprises to reduce the operational cost in still able to achieve their original goal for business intelligence and big data. And these days, a particular type of service called cloud computing basically means the larger corporations like Amazon and Google, they are outsourcing their IT services to small and medium-sized enterprises so that the small and medium-sized enterprises do not have to hire a whole bunch of people for their IT infrastructures. They don't have to invest on the hardware, on software, on the IT professionals. All they have to do is use the cloud computing services from Amazon or Google or other cloud computing service providers. And of course, they have to pay for the services. But this allows the small and medium-sized enterprises to reduce the operational cost. Now, in terms of data analytics, we are going to suggest end-user development tools for business intelligence and business decision support, including Microsoft Excel. But Microsoft has another product which is competing with Excel. It's similar. It's called Power BI. Basically, BI stands for business intelligence. That is a flagship from the Microsoft for business intelligence. But we also have the competitors such as IBM Cognos and Tableau. So these are end-user development tools to allow small and medium-sized enterprises to analyze the data to come up with a good business decisions. Now, the outcome of the business intelligence and the big data initiatives will be the new knowledge product. Before the small and medium-sized enterprises start such kind of initiative, they must know what type of knowledge product they want out of these initiatives, whether it's a new business plan or a new product or a new service or a specific new customer segment or a new set of business decision-making rules or a new marketing materials from the data. So that's why I said new knowledge product basically will be the outcome of the business intelligence and the big data initiatives. And before the small and medium-sized enterprises start or launch this kind of initiative, they must have a clear vision. What type of new knowledge product they want to get out of these initiatives. Now, having said all of these approaches for small and medium-sized enterprises, I just want to emphasize there are many potential risks that small and medium-sized enterprises may face when they attempt to use business intelligence and big data to outpace their competitors. Okay, so keep in mind there are many potential risks. Here I just list a few risks so that you know. One is a waking of a sleeping giant. Let's say you are a small or medium-sized enterprise. You don't want a larger competitor with more budget try to utilize the business intelligence with more data and better technology. Because if you had a very successful story about the business intelligence and big data, and your competitor basically will follow your approach, okay? Adopt the same type of technology and with more data. And we know that with more data, there's a potential that we are going to get more return out of the data. Although that there's no guarantee that, but the potential is there. And the second risk is about the data security and the privacy. There is no perfect system that can protect the data, that can protect the privacy. So if you are going to store the data in-house or even using the cloud computing services, there is a potential that there is a security breach, or there will be a violation of the privacy if you are going to hire the third party to analyze your data. And that is the exact same problem with the Facebook a few years ago. Facebook had a huge scandal. Why? Because it used the third party service provider called Cambridge Analytica, which is another company, to analyze its data. And that caused huge problems with the Facebook. And we want to avoid this kind of situation. And also keep in mind, all data collected by a small or medium-sized enterprise can never be big. Although that we have heard many successful stories about big data, I'm telling you that for all private companies, the data can never be big. Almost all successful stories about big data, they are government-funded projects. Why? Government can collect any type of data they want. But for private companies, there's a clear boundary about what type of data they can collect and what type of data they cannot collect. And that's why I say all data collected by private organizations can never be big, okay? So, and also, if you are going to use big data analytics to analyze the data, keep in mind, you may end up with false discoveries, or you may end up with short-term so-called decisions. Why? Because these days, all discoveries derived from data are not suitable for long-term decisions. Customers' behavior will change. You may have heard about the story about the beer and the diapers. So in the middle of 1990s, Walmart in the United States found that a lot of customers purchased the beer, also purchased the diaper. The reason is straightforward. The new dad basically purchased the diapers for the babies. At the same time, he will reward himself with the beer. And that's why these new dads basically buy beer and the diapers at the same time. And Walmart just found that. Now, we can end up with different business decisions from that result, we can put beer and the diapers together so that the customer can find them easily. Or we can say, put the beer and the diapers far away in the store to force the customer to go through the entire store to find both items, because we know that the new dads must find the diapers before going home. Okay, at the same time, he wanted the beer. And that's why I say, hopefully, the more time the new dads stay in the store, and he will spend more. And which decision is the best? No one knows, okay? And in fact, normally the stores basically will put on the beer diapers together for a week. And after a week, there's no increase in the sales, then we are going to do the opposite, put the beer and the diapers far away. And we are going to test that. And in fact, because the customer's purchase behavior may change over the time, all the decisions derived from the data are not suitable for, not stable, which means never think about a single decision come out with the data, because that will be impossible. Customers' purchase behavior will change, the scenario will change, and the time basically is progressing. And that's why I said, you may come up with a good business decision, but after a while, you will see the return will diminish. And that's why it may be the time for another decision based on the same result. And also, we may end up with false discoveries. Let's say we analyze the data. We found that the ice cream sales basically is proportional to the number of drownings. And in fact, we didn't include the one data item, which is the weather. Why? Because in the summer, the ice cream sales will increase. So is the number of drownings in the lakes and the rivers. And if we are going to remove the weather from the data, and we may basically end up with false discoveries. Another thing is we may end up with, say, a customers purchase the coffee, also purchase tea at the same time, so that we are going to package a coffee and a tea as a single bundle to try to sell the customers. In fact, most customers will drink either coffee or tea, but not both. Why? Coffee and tea, they are substitutes products, and which means they will substitute with each other, and the customers are not interested in buy both products. The same idea applies to the TV and exercise machines. If we are going to analyze all data, we may come up with, say, customers purchase the TV, also purchase the exercise machines at the same time. But in fact, if we go to the macro level of data, we may never find this kind of pattern. And this kind of phenomenon is called the Simpson's paradox in statistics. And it has been around for half a century, and it's there, okay? And there's no good solution to solve this type of problem in statistics. And there will be no good computerized solution to solve this kind of problems, such as Simpson's paradox as well. So keep in mind, you may end up with false discoveries, and you need to examine the discoveries based on the data in details, and hopefully you are going to end up with a good business decision. So in summary, I could like to suggest small and medium-sized enterprises to focus on the strategic use of big data, knowledge-guided big data business, big data project planning, and feasible IT solutions specifically suitable for small and medium-sized enterprises and the new knowledge product. And this is the end of my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, that presentation. We'll now open the floor for questions. Like we mentioned earlier in the introduction, please use the chat function and select Bria Matheson to send your questions to her privately. We do already have our first question for the day, though. The first question that came through is that a lot of the small, not essential retail businesses are on the verge of bankruptcy due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the shutdown that's come with that. Do you have any specific advice to those retailers on how they can use big data analytics to deal with this difficult economic situation?
Well, frankly, I don't have a good suggestions. The reason is that in order to adopt business intelligence and big data, the company must invest a lot on the infrastructures, on the IT literacies of the employees, and so on. And this means a huge investment for the organization. And unless the organization has a clear vision about how they are going to utilize the big data in order to achieve the competitive advantages over the competitors, otherwise, it's just the exercise for the organization, and there is a huge risk of failure for such kind of initiative. So I don't have in summary, I don't have a good suggestion for that. But the bottom line is that big data and business intelligence must generate enough return on the investment for the organization in order to be successful.
Thank you. The next question we have relates to some of the risks that you've elaborated on, and I think it ties into the first one a bit. And that's someone's wondering if you can give more examples on how to mitigate the risks from the scenarios that you described.
Well, that is a good question. Once again, normally we are going to rely on the expert's opinion. Okay, whether it's the business manager of the organization or from a consulting firm or any other forms. Basically, we need the expert opinion to examine the discoveries from the data in order to leverage the data in order to come up with good business decisions. And now, for the knowledge of product out of the business intelligence, it may mean a new business plan. Okay, say we come up with a new business model for our organization, or it may say we are going to focus on a specific new customer segment so that we can invest a lot of market effort on that segment in order to be successful. Or we can say come up with a new product, okay? And once again, we need to analyze the data. Without the data, there is no basis for such a kind of decision. And once again, the data is form the basis of the decision, but it is the job of the business manager or the top management of the organization to figure out what they can do with the big data and the business intelligence.
One of the things that I've heard you touch on a number of times now relates to the idea of a clear vision before you really start launching any sort of big data enterprise. Based on the research you've conducted, or many of the papers you've published, when it comes to what a clear vision looks like, what it should contain, are there any tips or advice that you can give to anybody considering such a move to do the legwork before launching it so that they've optimized their chance for success?
Yeah, excellent. Based on my previous research, in order to gain the clear vision on the strategy use of big data, I could like to suggest that the managers of the organization to read the successful stories about business intelligence and big data in media, on the internet or in the traditional media like newspapers, TVs. So once they read many successful stories about big data and business intelligence, try to analyze the story in terms of the strategic use of the big data in the story, and about the new knowledge product in the story. So once you analyze all successful stories, it will help the managers to come up with a good or clear vision about the business intelligence and the big data. So that will be my suggestion, to read the successful stories and focus on specific aspects of these stories, strategic use of big data, as well as the new knowledge product out of the big data.
That's great. We have another question, I think, that fits nicely into this point. So again, kind of looking at the best practices that you've learned as you research this. One of the questions, and again, it fits within the theme of constraints and cost. Can you give any more insight on what type of data a small or medium-sized business should look at, should focus on, since they may have limited resources, but might be interested in pursuing a project like this?
Well, I believe that for small and medium-sized enterprises, all of them are collecting customer data. So we can start with the customer data. But we can also include the operational data, which means the data associated with the internal operations of the organization. So if we are going to combine the customer data with the in-house operational data, we may come up with a good vision about the big data. One example is we want to reduce the operational cost while maintaining the level of services to the customers. Or we can say, why not we try to explore a new customer segments by introducing additional product. Means if we introduce additional products, we are not going to increase the operational cost a lot. Why not do that? So we can start with different types of data and try to play with the data, analyze the data, and come up with something.
Great, thank you. One of the things that I found interesting, I'll go back to the beer and diapers example that you raised. And I'm wondering if first off, if this is even close to correct, but it does seem as though even once you conduct an analysis and you get a sense of some of the trends or patterns you're seeing, that there is need for continued experimentation, continued iteration in your processes. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, so as I said, there is no stable long-term decisions from the same observation. And in most cases, the customer purchase behavior will change over the time. And that's why don't rely on a single business decisions that can generate profits for your organization. Always try different alternative business decisions to see whether they work or not. If they work better, why not use them? If they are not better, and then you learned something from the experiments. So once again, business operations is a continuous process. So is the big data and the business intelligence.
It certainly sounds, whether it's new segments, new approaches, finding ways to decrease costs, that I mean, there are absolutely some serious potential positive upsides to conducting this type of analysis. In the work you've done or in the things you've learned throughout the course of your research, do you have a sense of what the cost is to a small business if they want to get started down this road? I mean, a lot of money can mean different things to different people, but just it's more of a question of curiosity.
Well, in my opinion is that if the business environment of the organization, particularly for small and medium-sized organizations, so if the business environment is a red ocean environment, which means tough competition, and my suggestion to the small and medium-sized enterprises, try the so-called blue ocean strategy, which means don't try to survive in the red ocean environment. Instead, try to change the business environment by focusing on new customer segments or new products, okay? And hopefully, this will translate into the survival of the organization. Now, in terms of the investment. If the organization try to adopt the blue ocean strategy, it means completely changing the current business practice. It means a huge investment. It's not means a small investment, and there is a risk of failure. Okay, so keep in mind, so there is a potential for the failure, and there no one can guarantee that. So it's totally up to the business managers to decide whether they want to go for this approach, or they will focus on their current product or services by improving their existing product or services. And once again, the business intelligence can contribute to improving the current business practice to the organization as well. So once again, it's totally up to the business managers to decide.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, everybody, that is all the time that we do have for today. Dr. Wang, I want to thank you very much for your time and for sharing your expertise with us. I thank all of you for joining us today. I hope you found the presentation interesting and impactful. And we do want to let you know that, again, this is a webinar that is part of a larger series. Next up in our series, we will be hosting a webinar with Supplement King titled Coping with COVID-19 and SME Business Community Continuity Roundtable. This event is, of course, going to take place, as I said, on Wednesday, September, sorry, pardon me, I said September 19th. It's September 9th. And registration is on the network website under upcoming events. So if you'd like to learn more, please visit the SoBiSchoolProsperityNetwork.com and sign up for our newsletter. It's the easiest way to get the latest advice from our experts and stay up to date on our webinars and our upcoming events. Finally, if you have any further questions, Dr. Wang would be happy to answer, but we'd ask you to do it through the website contact page, or as he gave out his own phone number, I suppose that's one way you could reach him as well. We all hope you have a terrific day, and thank you very much again for joining us for today's session.
Thank you very much.